Now, from CBS News Miami, this is Facing South Florida with Jim DeFede.
Welcome to Facing South Florida. I'm Jim DeFede. Later in the show, we will talk about the deadly mass shooting on the campus of Florida State University and what the legislature is doing on the issue of guns. But I want to start with questions swirling around Governor Ron DeSantis, First Lady Casey DeSantis, and Florida's new Attorney General James Uthmeier. They involve Hope Florida, an organization created by Casey DeSantis, which is supposed to help people who are financially struggling. The idea is to get them off government services and instead direct them to religious groups and other charities for assistance. But in a stunning development, the chair of the Hope Florida Foundation testified that nearly all of the money the group raised didn't go to helping the poor. It went to political committees connected to the governor. Here is what House Speaker Danny Perez had to say about it last week.
Look, whether those allegations turn into criminal charges or not are not for me to conclude. I am not the judge, I'm not the jury, I'm not the prosecutor, I'm not the defense. I'm simply the seeker of truth. That is the position that we have taken. As soon as we have all of these answers, as soon as we have received all of these documents, and the people are able to see what really happened with the $10 million that were diverted from the state treasury, from the federal government, from the people of Florida, and sent to Hope Florida, and eventually down to 501c3s and 501c4s and political committees, then maybe we've reached the end. We are far from the end. It doesn't seem like the $10 million, and the way that it was funneled through different organizations was done properly. That is my opinion. But when you ask me about criminal proceedings, that is not our goal. That is not something we control. All we are trying to do is seek the truth.
So let's take the time and go through what we know. Last year, the DeSantis administration discovered that a company called Centene was overbilling the state under Medicare. The state determined that Centene owed the people of Florida $67 million. But in September, the DeSantis administration instructed Centene to only return $57 million to Florida taxpayers and send $10 million to the Hope Florida Foundation. It's important to note that under state law, DeSantis administration was required to report the terms of the settlement with Centene to the legislature. But they never told lawmakers about the $10 million to Hope Florida. On April 9th, a Florida House Health Care Committee, led by Republican State Representative Alex Andrade, held a hearing trying to get answers about this $10 million payment. Here is Andrade questioning DeSantis' head of the Agency for Healthcare Administration, Siobhan Harris.
What I'm trying to understand is why ACA felt it could contractually obligate Centene as part of a legal claim with the state to direct $10 million from Centene to also go to Hope Florida. That is a fair question that I have not got a response to.
I think we've answered.
You haven't, because I still have no idea why this was justified. I have very strong beliefs that this was not legal, and I have no idea, despite y'all's heavy involvement with Hope Florida over the past several years at DCF, what that money was going to be used for. But you did just tell me it's not going to housing assistance, job readiness, or any of the other public services that ACA says Hope Florida is providing to Floridians. So if it's not for that, what is it for?
The answer would be uncovered 2 days later, on April 11th, thanks to some great work by Florida journalists led by the Miami Herald and Tampa Bay Times. We now know from campaign finance reports that within days of receiving the $10 million, Hope Florida sent $5 million to secure Florida's future, and $5 million went to save our society from drugs. From there, Representative Andrade alleges most of the money was routed to yet another political committee, Keep Florida Clean, which was run at the time by Ron DeSantis' then Chief of Staff, James Uthmeier, who DeSantis recently appointed to replace Ashley Moody as the state's Attorney General. Now here is where the money trail gets even murkier. We now know from campaign finance reports that Keep Florida Clean sent millions of dollars to the Republican Party of Florida and more than $1 million to the Florida Freedom Fund, which is Ron DeSantis' political action committee. So, the way this looks, $10 million that should have been returned to the taxpayers wasn't. And even though it was sent to a charity which supposedly helps struggling families, it wasn't even used for that purpose. Instead, it ended up in the bank accounts of political committees controlled by Ron DeSantis and the state's current Attorney General. And what did they do with this money? According to Andrade, the money was used, at least in part, to defeat Amendment 3, which would have legalized marijuana in Florida. Last week, on April 15th, the Florida House and Andrade held their second hearing on Hope Florida, and there were new details that emerged. Andrade had the chairman of the Hope Florida Foundation, Joshua Hayes, come to testify under oath, and that's when we discovered this.
Related to these two $5 million grants, were you contacted by anyone from the Executive Office of the Governor prior to issuing these grants?
All of my communications were with General Counsel.
Okay. Did General Counsel inform you that there was a settlement with ACA?
Indeed.
And that was Jeff Aaron?
Indeed.
When you stated in the minutes, this proposal has been developed in alignment with the department and executive administration, who were you referring to?
Through my conversations with Counsel, understanding that there is connectivity in the network of the Executive Office of the Governor and the General Counsel.
Throughout the hearing, Hayes repeatedly said he relied on Jeff Aaron for everything he did. And who is Jeff Aaron? Jeff Aaron is a major attorney and lobbyist in Tallahassee who has represented Ron DeSantis on numerous legal cases. And it was the governor's office that recommended that Hope Florida Foundation hire Aaron as its attorney. Aaron vehemently denies he has done anything wrong. In a statement to CBS News Miami, Andrade said, "I am extremely confident no one broke any laws. I have never talked to Uthmeier, the governor, or First Lady about Hope Florida. This is a politically motivated witch hunt. Andrade hasn't asked me for records, and he hasn't asked me to testify. I've offered to produce any public record I have. I had nothing to do with Centene or that money coming into Hope Florida Foundation, nor did I have any involvement in how or what Secure Florida's Future or Save Our Society from Drugs did with the money." James Uthmeier has also continually denied doing anything illegal or improper. One of the things that has been fascinating, though, is watching how Ron and Casey DeSantis have reacted as the story has developed in recent weeks. For instance, before we learned about the $10 million payment to Hope Florida, reporters had started asking some basic questions about Hope Florida. Because it is a tax-exempt, nonprofit organization, they have to make public something called a 990 form, which outlines where their money comes from and where it goes. But when reporters asked to see them, Hope Florida refused to provide them. And so back on April 1st, when DeSantis and the First Lady were asked about why these forms hadn't been filed, the governor became indignant and attacked the reporter.
We're not going to let you try to smear a good program with this stuff on these things. I know the House is feeding you guys stuff. We weren't born yesterday. We understand what they're trying to do. They're trying to kind of sully this. This is the nonprofit arm. It's a charitable arm. They're going to take care of the paperwork. But while you're worried about filing paperwork, we're worried about lifting Floridians up. We're worried about getting people on the path to self-sufficiency. We're worried about changing lives. We're not worried about trying to play phony gotcha games. So go back to the House Leadership Office, talk to their staff, let them feed you some more BS, try to recycle it. But nobody trusts you anymore. You don't have any credibility because you're always peddling the same BS.
Casey DeSantis pleaded for people to understand the good work she was doing.
Can you imagine what it must be like for a single mom who's sitting there at the dining room table trying to figure out how she's going to keep the lights on, how she's going to be able to provide educational opportunities for her kids, how she's going to make sure that they have school supplies, how she can keep down a job, how she can make sure that they're doing their homework, and she's taken on this burden all by herself, and she doesn't know where to turn to get help.
Neither of them ever actually addressed the question. And as more and more information has emerged, Ron DeSantis has continued to lash out, focusing his anger against Andrade, Danny Perez, and other House Republicans. Here he was on Monday.
Let me tell you something. None of these Republican leaders got elected on the platform that they were going to launch baseless attacks against the governor and first lady. That is not why they got elected. Had they run on that, they would have lost their primaries. They would never have been elected in the first place.
And here he was on Tuesday.
These guys in the Florida House of Representatives, you got a cabal of them in the leadership. they are colluding with liberal media and the Democratic Party in Florida to try to manufacture smears. This is a manufactured hoax. And you have liberal media and liberal Democrats pushing this. And we have some of these leaders in the Florida House who are stabbing their constituents in the back and joining with liberal media and liberal Democrats. It is a farce. It is manufactured, and it's part of their political agenda. And look, some people feel threatened by the First Lady. Let's just be clear about that. They know this. They say, you saw her up here. You know, if you're looking at, like 2026 and you've got, some horse, you don't want her anywhere near that. You're very worried because she runs circles around their people. Everybody knows that.
And this was DeSantis on Wednesday.
This is being driven by the leadership in the House, by some of the entrenched staff. This is the swamp in action. This is the swamp trying to strike back.
In a way, you can understand DeSantis' shock and anger. For 6 years, the legislature never challenged him, passing all of his bills and proposals while privately complaining they were being bullied by him. But after his failure to run for president, DeSantis has lost some of his clout. They are not scared of him any longer. Here is how House Speaker Danny Perez responded to the governor's daily attacks.
It seems that we're getting into this regularity where he has a temper tantrum. The governor is the only one that has not been able to answer any of the criticism that has come through Hope Florida and say, maybe we could have done better. All he does is deflect with lies and stories that never happened instead of just owning it. It is very clear by what has been put out there that Hope Florida could have been ran better. That maybe transparency would be a benefit for Hope Florida. He refuses to acknowledge that. At least the chair of Hope Florida had the courage to do so. Why is it that everyone around him has to abide by a certain set of rules? Rules for thee, but not for me. That seems to be the motto of Ron DeSantis today. And it's sad to me, because that is not the man that came into this city and worked out of this building 6 years ago. At some point, he has to answer that question. And I'm waiting for that answer.
When we come back, I speak to Representative Andrade about where the investigation goes from here. Stay with us. Welcome back. Last week, I sat down with State Representative Alex Andrade, a Republican from Pensacola, to talk about his investigation of the Hope Florida Foundation. I started by asking him for his reaction to what he had learned so far. You're going to hold a hearing next week, you're correct? And you're inviting Jeff Aaron along with the heads of those two groups that received the $5 million. What are you hoping to learn at that hearing?
I'm hoping to fully understand why they both immediately turned this money over to a PAC after receiving it from a charity. I'm hoping to fully understand how many assurances Jeff Aaron provided the board that he was the attorney for, and also the two groups that he instructed to ask for this money. I'm trying to understand James Uthmeier's full involvement. I do know that James Uthmeier directly personally reached out to these groups. I have the text messages from James where he identifies himself as the governor's chief of staff. James and Jeff both, they played on people's lack of information, and they played on the fact that they could say, we're working on behalf of the governor to provide assurances to people that everything was above board.
What do you think their ultimate goal was? At the end of the day, what did they want to do with this money?
They used it to fund, I guess, campaign messaging. Some of the money actually went back to Governor DeSantis's PAC, the Keep Florida Free PAC. Unfortunately, from what I can tell, there was an entitlement element. There was an entitlement culture in the governor's office.
You know, this is one of those examples of the legislature doing the checks and balances that is appropriate. Are you at all concerned that this is really the first time we've seen that? I realize you can't go back retroactively, but it seems like only now we're seeing this level of scrutiny. there could have been scrutiny on other things that have taken place in the past, whether it was the flights to Martha's Vineyard or the use of state planes. I guess I'm curious as to whether or not you think that the legislature in previous years, by failing to hold the governor's office accountable, made it easier for them to feel that sense of entitlement that you're now describing.
Well, there's, I think, a lot of those other circumstances that some folks that might not be politically aligned with me cite to. Those might be instances where where folks would disagree on like the policy decision of, the use of these taxpayer funds. For instance, I'm a supporter of those Martha's Vineyard flights. I think that raised a lot of awareness about the circumstances of what the federal government was doing at the time. And I think we as the state were well within our rights to fund those Martha's Vineyard flights. In this circumstance, what we had was a public official, one of the highest ranking public officials in Florida, the governor's chief of staff, now the attorney general, involve himself in a settlement, carve out $10 million from that settlement. That's no longer serving any public purpose. That takes it out of the realm of a policy decision or a policy debate, and it's completely inappropriate.
As I mentioned earlier in the show, both Jeff Aaron and James Uthmeyer strenuously deny they have done anything illegal or improper. Aaron says he wasn't involved in the transfer of taxpayer money into the Hope Florida Foundation, and he has no idea what happened to the money after the foundation gave it to two political committees. And as I continue my conversation with Andrade, you will see how this money and how it was used is going to be a key question. For those who may not understand at home, what if they use it for political purposes? Why is that a problem?
You can't use charitable donations, let alone Medicaid money, let alone taxpayer money, to fund a PAC.
There's also a broader question of the work that Hope Florida is doing itself. It seems as if every legislator or most legislators begin their questioning by saying, I support the goals, the aims of Hope Florida. I think this is a good charity. I think this is a good effort. However, and then they go on from there. Are we confident that we know that the work that they've done is good in the sense of they claim to have helped 30,000 individuals in Florida? Are there metrics that support that? Are we seeing any data that actually is able to understand what Hope Florida has achieved, what these, for instance, the Department of Children and Families, with their 150 Hope Florida navigators, what outcomes have actually come as a result of it?
No, there's no identifiable metrics. These are state employees that, really the way I equate it is these are state employees that have just been told to do a better job as state employees in their existing roles. No, I mean, the concept of helping families achieve financial independence, economic self-sufficiency, that's a noble cause. I could not tell you if Hope Florida, the operational arm, has done anything to assist Florida families beyond what state employees were supposed to already be doing. On the foundation side, I was shocked to find out this week that other than this $10 million in illicit money they received, they'd only raised about $2 million so far in their entire existence, and they'd only written $500,000 worth of grants. I was further shocked to find out that those $500,000 worth of grants came in the form of, $10,000, $20,000 grants that were heavily scrutinized and reviewed by DCF itself before those grants were approved. Whereas this $10 million, DCF was not informed it went into this bank account, and DCF had no idea about it. And there wasn't even a board vote from the Hope Florida Foundation to authorize these two $5 million grants going to these dark money groups.
There was legislation to sort of embed permanently Hope Florida into the state government. Is it safe to assume that bill, at least for this session, is dead?
Probably. There was the director of Hope Florida, the executive director for Hope Florida resigned yesterday. A board member on the Hope Florida Foundation resigned today. I think that a lot of people are now realizing they need to take a step back and really reassess exactly whether or not this concept was prepared to actually do the job they claimed they were doing.
Let me wrap up by asking you just point blank the allegation that the governor has been making, which is this is all just political. It's you wanting to undermine, you and the House Speaker, Danny Perez, wanting to undermine DeSantis, wanting to scuttle Casey DeSantis's possible bid for governor. That's what's at the heart of all of this. And that if it wasn't for Casey DeSantis's ambition, you wouldn't care about any of it.
She's welcome to run for governor. There's no competency prerequisite to filing to run for governor. I haven't really mentioned Casey in all of this because I don't see where she's been involved in any of it. In reality, I could care less, honestly, about the governor himself or his wife right now.
As I noted, Andrade is planning to hold more hearings in the coming weeks. Aaron told me he hasn't received a request from Andrade to appear before the committee, but that he has nothing to hide because he did nothing wrong. When we come back, the shooting at FSU. Stay with us. The mass shooting on the campus of Florida State University took place just blocks from the state capitol, where the legislature is meeting. We have seen in recent years the legislature weaken gun laws in the state. Last year, DeSantis pushed a bill doing away with requiring a permit to carry a concealed weapon. This year, he has been pushing a bill to lower the age from 21 to 18 to buy rifles and shotguns. After the FSU shooting, I spoke to Nikki Fried, the chair of the Florida Democratic Party.
We saw during the 2018 after Parkland, everybody came together. They understood that they had a responsibility to protect the communities. We had the kids from March for Our Lives starting it and massive protests all across our state, all across the Capitol, both here in Tallahassee and in Washington, D.C. And it seemed like finally people were putting partisan politics aside and doing what was best for their communities. You saw legislation in 2018 that was pushed by Republicans, that were signed by Republican governor at that time, Rick Scott. And it seems like we were moving in the right direction. But unfortunately, in the last couple of years, whether it is the ambitions of Ron DeSantis to have wanted to win a presidential primary for president, or people are just forgetting our history in the past here in the state of Florida, because it wasn't just Parkland, it was also Pulse. There was just back-to-back gun violence and mass shootings here in our state that got us to that pivotal moment in our history. And unfortunately, we are seeing a Republican governor of Ron DeSantis pushing these initiatives and getting support mostly from the House and a couple of senators to untangle all of these protections that are put in place. And again, as somebody who oversaw the concealed weapons program for 4 years, the background checks for somebody to have a concealed was essential to protect our communities. And I don't understand why that they felt that was a program that was too much. And now people don't need a permit, don't need to go through trainings in order to have a concealed at this point. We saw that the gun safety bills that continue to push by Democrats not see the light of day. And the House passed this year, moving the purchasing of firearms from 21 to 18, all for political reasons. This is not for the best interests of our communities. It's for politics, and shame on them for even having these conversations.
Well, that's all the time we have today. If you have any thoughts or comments, feel free to contact me at jdefede@cbs.com. I do enjoy hearing from you. Thanks again for watching, and enjoy the rest of your day.